Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Energy Climate Change. I need everybody to settle down, please. Welcome to the Energy, Climate Change, and Environmental Justice Committee. I'm joined by Councilmember Corretz and Councilmember Krikorian. I only have one speaker card. I'm sorry, I have two speaker cards. If I call your name, please come up to the table. Miguel Ramos, are you here?
Yes.
You want to come on up? Shelly Luz? Did you pronounce your last name correctly?
Yes.
Okay. So what items are you speaking on? Item number one, both of you?
Yes.
One and one? Okay, you both have each 1 minute. So you want to start first, Miguel?
Sure. Hello, good afternoon. My name is Miguel Ramos. I'm with the Nature Conservancy and also a member of the Our Water LA Coalition. And I'm just here to talk a little bit about the work around Our Water LA Coalition and working with the county with the Safe Clean Water program, and just to highlight some of the priorities that we've been working on and to address and working with communities, specifically around nature-based solutions. So making sure that we're including native landscaping and the work, being able to address issues around park space. So while we're looking at stormwater capture, that we also look at open space for disadvantaged communities. Another aspect is to focus on community engagement, making sure communities involved at every level of the process, and making sure that these community benefits that they're aware of and that they are something that the community wants. And lastly, I want to focus on being able to hone in on equity. So touching on issues around anti-displacement ordinances that address the investments that happen in communities.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Shelly. There's also another speaker, Bruce Resnick. Are you here?
Yeah, and we were talking about the Safe Clean Water.
Item number one is what you signed up for. Is that what you intend to speak on?
I was doing the Safe Clean Water. Actually.
Item number one, yes.
They do it all at the beginning.
This is number one, sir. Shelly, you want to go ahead?
Thank you. I'm Shelly Luce. I'm the CEO of Heal the Bay. I'm also a member of the Our Water LA Coalition. And I want to thank the City of LA for their leadership in passing Measure W. And I also want to focus on the fact that the watershed area steering committees will be deciding on how a large portion of Measure W funds are spent, the 50% regional portion. And the City of LA can be a great ally to Our Water and to communities throughout the region by continuing to focus on nature-based solutions and on environmental equity, making sure that disadvantaged communities are served by Measure W funds, and ensuring that this money is spent in a way that greens our communities and cleans water and increases water supply in the communities that need it the most. So thank you very much for continuing to work on that with us.
Thank you, Shelley. Next speaker, Bruce.
Excellent. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm Bruce Resnick with LA Waterkeeper and also part of the Our Water LA Coalition. I too want to thank the city for its tremendous leadership on getting Measure W passed and on all the work to start getting ready for implementing Safe Clean Water. I've had a chance to talk with many folks in the mayor's office, city staff, council offices, and we just wanted to kind of highlight again how important what the city does with its project selection. I think the city is going to get between $30 to $40 million a year in local return funds. There's the regional pot of funding. There's the influence on WASC. And we just want to make sure our priorities are implemented throughout all those sources of funding, and that includes a heavy emphasis on equity and focusing on frontline communities, multiple community benefits, and the best way to achieve all of those is through nature-based projects, which you've heard the other two speakers. And so as we work to implement and come to the final ordinance later this year, knock on wood, that is what Our Water LA and LA Waterkeeper are going to be focusing on. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much. I don't see any other speakers on any of our items or general public comments, so I'm going to go ahead and close that for today's agenda. If there are no objections, I'd like to move items 2, 4, 5, and 6 on consent. Any objections to that? Seeing none, that will be the order. And that's items 2, 4, 5, and 6. Approved on consent. Let's move on to item number 7. This is a public hearing for condemnation action. Is that correct, Mr. CLA? So why don't you go ahead and read that into the record, please?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Item number 7, City Attorney Report and Ordinance relative to finding that in the public interest and necessity require the acquisition of title and fee simple to property located at 128 East Hurricane Street, Los Angeles, California, 90292 for the construction, operation, and maintenance of the Venice Auxiliary Pumping Plant project.
Okay, thank you. I also want the record to reflect we've been joined by Mr. O'Farrell. Do you want to go first? On
Yes,
this item?
good afternoon, members. I'm John Miner with the Real Property Division of the City Attorney's Office. With me are Augusta Parcero with the Bureau of Engineering and Mr. Ali Posty with the Bureau of Sanitation. We're presenting the report, as has been noted, requesting committee approval of a report authorizing the condemnation of property at 128 East Hurricane Street for the construction, operation, and maintenance of the Venice Auxiliary Pumping Plant project. The owners are in the room. I don't know if they wish to be heard. We're approximately $1 million apart between what the city values this unimproved 4,200 square feet parcel and what the owners are asking. Being unable to reach an agreement, we're requesting that this report be moved forward to council with the ultimate goal of approving an ordinance for the condemnation of this property for that project.
All right, thank you, sir. And this is a property in the Venice area which is currently vacant, is that correct?
Correct.
Are the property owners, are they here?
Yes.
Do you wish to speak? Just giving you an opportunity to do so if you want to. Also, let the record reflect that we've been joined by Councilmember Cedillo. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Dan Whalen. My wife Sharon McQueen is also here. We're the owners of that property. We have no objection to the taking of the property. It's just like the gentleman to my left said that our appraisal is a little bit higher than the city's appraisal, and we need to resolve that, and we are willing to work with them in an effort to do that.
Very well, thank you, sir. Members, are there any questions on this item? Okay. Seeing none, then I'm going to go ahead. If there is no objection, I'd like to move this item forward.
Unanimously?
Unanimously, yep.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, members.
Thank you, sir. Have a good day. Okay, let's move on to item number 1. If I can have the staff from the CAO's office and the CLA's office, please come forward. I know that we have policy consideration to take up in future meetings related to stormwater, which I've stated before. However, I think it's important that you provide us with a brief administrative recap of Measure W implementation, including some of the recommendations before us today.
Jessica Kwok, CAO. Item number 1 on today's agenda is a joint CAO-CLA report recommending that the council request the city attorney to prepare and present 2 ordinances relative to the Measure W Safe Clean Water Program. One for the process to appoint members to the Watershed Area Steering Committees, and one to establish the special fund. Some background on this program. On November 6, 2018, Measure W, the Safe Clean Water Program, was placed on the ballot. The measure passed with at least 2/3 majority, or 69% approval. This measure is essentially a parcel tax of 2.5 cents per square foot of impermeable space. This tax is to pay for water quality and water supply projects throughout LA County. The program itself is divided into 3 sub-programs. Administrative, so 10% of the proceeds from this tax will be retained by the county for administrative purposes. 40% will be returned back to the municipalities, and 50% to the regional. In this regional program, 50% of the funds will be spent proportionally by watershed. In order to allocate these funds, there is a regional program Watershed Area Steering Committee, or WASCs. Throughout LA County, there are 9 watershed committees Each committee has 17 members. There are 7 allocated for municipalities who have the majority share of space, 5 agency seats, and 5 community seats. The city participates in 3 watersheds and can appoint 3 seats for the Central Santa Monica Bay watershed, 3 seats for Upper Los Angeles River watershed, and 1 seat to the South Santa Monica Bay watershed.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members. Rafael Prado with the CLA's office. With regard to those municipal seats, your committee and the council requested our offices to come back with options on how to appoint those. We reviewed various options consistent with existing city policy. One of them was looking at the Propo committee and how it's structured, as well as other committees. We looked at a model where the mayor appoints all of those 7 total seats, or the council president, or another model. What we've like to recommend to your committee is that for each of those, we come up with, for the Central Santa Monica Bay Steering Committee, that the mayor appoints 1, council president appoints 1, and the chair of this committee appoints 1, and that approach be followed as well for the Upper Los Angeles River Steering Committee. And then for the South Santa Monica Bay Steering Committee, there's only 1 municipal seat there that pertains to appointments approach, so we recommend that the mayor appoints that one. So that's what we'd like to recommend with you with regard to the appointment approach.
The other recommendations contained in the report is to instruct the city attorney to submit an ordinance for the special fund that needs to be created. And then, yes, it was just for the special fund. Oh, and also to designate sanitation as the lead coordinating department on behalf of the city and all the participating city departments that will be part of this program.
Okay, members, do you have any questions? Mr. O'Farrell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just with the disbursement of these funds, and perhaps this will be addressed in the steering committee structure, but what is the plan to make sure that the funds are prioritized to be allocated to the most vulnerable, typically, neighborhoods experiencing poverty, that they receive the adequate funds?
We are in the process of we formed a working group consisting of CAO, CLA, Council District 6, and the Mayor's Office, and we're working together to develop a governance structure that will also address implementation and policy guidelines. So it's something that we plan to report back on in the next, probably within the next couple months.
Just with a focus on the traditionally overlooked neighborhoods.
Right.
Okay.
In addition to that, the county ordinance also calls for a component of that to be looked at as well in the scoring of the projects and so forth. So we plan to mirror what they've done, and if in fact there's some inadequate components, perhaps boost that as well too. So as Sarai indicated, we plan to come back to you with some sort of structure for that as well.
Wonderful. Great opportunity to address some of those needs with this initiative. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, members? And Mr. Koretz?
Yeah, I noticed sanitation is the lead department on this, but I'm wondering if there are other relevant departments that may have grant requests and how we make sure we're not competing against ourselves internally.
So yes, Mr. Koretz, there are a variety of approaches we could take. We have heard concerns from other departments and their role in this, from street services, from engineering as well, DWP. So our sense is during the next report, we should look at models to incorporate all departments so they can have equal say. In essence, our sense was it was important to designate a department as the lead coordinating agency with the county. So since sanitation has TNL compliance, they have that expertise, we figured they should perhaps maintain that role, but we'll have to work with those departments and sanitation to better craft that.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? No? All right, members, I have shared with you a list of recommendations that I'd like for us to adopt. So I believe, Mr. Prieto, you can read them into the record, please.
Certainly, Madam Chair. With respect to the amendment number 1, is to approve the CAO-CLA report dated June 28th with a modification to recommendation number 2 of the report to reconcile and address issues regarding the awarding and receipt of regional Measure W funds to proprietary departments. Number 2, instruct CAO-CLA to report back on a collective governance model for both the regional and municipal program, which factors in the participation of Bureau of Sanitation, DWP, Rec and Parks, BOE, and the Bureau of Street Services as well. Number 3, instruct CLA-CAO in consultation with appropriate departments to report back with recommendations on the following. A, how to strategize regional and local projects to further address equity, both with regards to funding as well as multi-benefit projects. B, development of a comprehensive Measure W strategy for project identification and development process that balances water supply, resilience, water quality compliance obligations of the city, and secondly, includes ways to prevent project selection conflicts of internal city competition for regional funding. And C, policies regarding the use of local return revenues, such as local hire options, to maximize maybe WEBE opportunities, partnership opportunities with local businesses, and prioritization of burdened communities in addition to existing Measure W mandated minimums. And that completes the recommendations.
Thank you, members. If there's no objections to this, I'd like to adopt these recommendations.
No objection.
So no objections. So we will move this unanimously.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to item number 3. You want to read that into the record?
Item number 3, joint report from the Department of Transportation, Bureau of Engineering, Bureau of Street Services, Bureau of Sanitation relative to the second round of corridors for the Complete Streets program.
So members, this item was heard in T committee a couple of weeks ago, and most of the subject matters pertain to the Transportation Commission as well as the Public Works Commission. However, I wanted us to review this item because part of the Complete Streets elements includes the installation of green infrastructure and possibly using Measure W. Although I agree on the general objectives, I think we need to be mindful of 2 things. 1, we have to finalize our policy related to Measure W, and 2, we haven't received any money from Measure W yet. So I will let you go ahead and do your presentation, then I would like to recommend what I think we should move forward with. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. Julie Souter with the Bureau of Engineering. I'm here this afternoon with
Dan Mitchell from the Department of Transportation.
Gene Edwards, Bureau of Engineering.
Today we're here with recommendations for the second round of the Complete Streets program. However, before I do that, I'd just like to give you a very brief overview on where we are today with our first round of the 6 streets for this program. As you know, we completed our very first street this past July, Roscoe Boulevard. We are currently wrapping up construction on Temple Boulevard, and by the end of the year, we'll be finishing our 3rd street, which is Venice Boulevard. 2 more streets, Avalon and Reseda, are currently in pre-design and design respectively, and we will be reporting back to Council once we move forward with those 2 projects. We're here today for the second round of the Complete Streets program, and as we move forward with this program, we're here today to recommend the framework for the development of this program as we move forward. So one of the items in the report is outlining the framework for the items that will be considered for the Complete Streets program. And as Council Member Martinez mentioned, green elements is part of those recommended scope items. The other item that we're recommending is we also recognize that there is some urgency in moving these projects forward. So of the 12 streets that were adopted in the 1920 budget, we are recommending that we move forward with pre-design with 3 of those adopted streets, which are Culver, La Brea, and Highland Avenue. Once we are done with the pre-design, we will be reporting back to Council on the recommendations, including the cost estimates at that time. Also included as part of this report is for the remaining of the 9 streets of the 12 that we were recommended, we will be doing some advanced planning to identify the prioritization on how we move forward using the recommendations of the scoping elements. So those are the items that we are here today for recommendations as we move forward with our second round of the Complete Streets program.
Anything else?
I think that's it.
Okay, so the T committee did move on recommendations 1, 2, 3, and 5 of the BOE report. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I appreciate that because it keeps things moving without getting too far ahead of ourselves with regards to Measure W. So do you have are there any questions, members, on this item? Mr. Krikorian?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not 100% clear on the impact of the T Committee's report in only advancing some but not all of the recommendations, and I want to explore that a little bit more with you. And particularly in the report, I appreciate the distinction between the basic elements of these and the secondary elements, because as you all know very well, one of the challenges that we've had in the first round of this is the Christmas tree effect of these wonderful complete streets that have absorbed vastly more money than could ever have been anticipated at the beginning for all sorts of things that have nothing whatsoever to do with traffic safety. And I want to prevent, as we move forward, I want us to develop a process by which that does not happen so that we don't end up with 4 or 5 really great whiz-bang streets around the city and very little to show for it in terms of reduction in people killed on our streets. So can you explain to me a little bit about what the impact is of the T Committee's recommendations with regard to your recommendations? In practical terms, what is, if we advance the T Committee's report, what does that mean to your work?
So for our work is so that we can identify, as we mentioned, what are the elements that are reconsidered the base scope, which addresses the overarching mission of the complete streets. And it also clearly identifies the other items which are, improvements that are consistent with the complete streets narrative, but not necessarily part of the base scope. And so with the item number 1, it gives us, the project delivery team, clear direction on what we will be including in our pre-design. So that's for the item number 1. So we clearly identify what is the agreed scope. For item number 2 is as we move forward, there was a clear understanding that we wanted to keep the program moving and not have any, kind of a lull in our progress. So in looking at the streets, we identified the 3 that we can move forward with the pre-design, and that's based on identification that we know these streets have well-recognized traffic control devices that will not significantly change the lane configuration. That, along with the identification of the traffic measures, those were, 3 good candidates to move forward without losing too much time. We wanted to keep the program moving forward. So with the pre-design scoping identified with the 3 streets that would allow us to move forward with the program, and in parallel, we will be able to do some pre-design efforts on the remaining 9. So that is...
We still will be able to. You'll still be able to advance some of your work on the remaining 9, even with this revised recommendation.
Right, the pre-planning process.
Okay.
And so what it will allow us to do is we use the pre-design checklist as kind of the basis to do the pre-design or pre-planning efforts, and so we will be able to come up with a prioritization on how we would like to move forward with the remaining 9 streets.
So, terrific. So to the Chair's point, since we have no set policy yet and no actual funding to use for some of the water reclamation and other issues, I share the Chair's sensitivity about advancing forward and starting to commit ourselves to those things before we know what our priorities are, what the projects are, how much they're going to cost, how much we have available. But at the same time, it's extremely important to me that we move forward with saving people's lives. And so can you begin your work on that pre-design element on kind of a no regrets basis where you can still add in later the secondary elements, the environmental elements without, in other words, if you move forward on the traffic safety design elements and the sidewalk repairs and those sorts of things, can you do that in a way, can you do the pre-planning of that in a way that doesn't preclude doing whatever you're going to do with Measure W later?
Yes, I mean, and that was the whole intent of being able to do the pre-design and then being able to come back to council with the recommendations. But the whole intent was to make sure that the work is integrated, and that's a big part of the concept of the complete streets is that we look at the traffic and the safety countermeasures and making sure that is consistent with what is the potential for all of these green infrastructure elements. And Dan or Jean, if you wanted to add.
Right. So the difference between the pre-design for the first 3 streets and the pre-planning for the additional 9 streets is really the degree of research and thought and effort that goes into researching what the existing location conditions are and estimating what the possible base scope improvements would be and would cost, and then also in addition to that we would present what the what options there are for secondary scopes and what those costs would be. Okay. And then we report back to council with these pre-design reports and estimates and schedules for you to consider. Whereas for the pre-planning for the 9 streets was basically doing research for opportunities, for particular financial opportunities like grants and such, and also if there's any conflicting large projects nearby, but we weren't going to go into a great pre-design depth into those 9 streets.
Okay, I get it. That makes complete sense. So we're going to move forward with the pre-planning that doesn't, and then in short order, we can revisit the issue of the pre-design aspects once there's greater clarity around the available funding and so forth. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
And just so that we're clear, we can also bring this item back in a few weeks in conjunction with my instructions in the previous item number 1.
Perfect.
This is Dan Mitchell from LADOT. I also wanted to add that most of these street sections are priority corridors for Vision Zero, and we're moving forward with temporary treatments to try to improve the safety of these streets, while the Complete Streets program would come back and make those permanent. That's the vision.
Great.
Any other questions, members?
Madam Chair, just real
Mr.
quick,
O'Farrell?
kind of to follow along what Mr. Krikorian just mentioned, of course, safety, especially pedestrian safety, is of the paramount importance to me. It's my number 1 transit priority for sure. So that's all good. Is there thought in terms of the bus stops? We have so many, especially seniors or children, just everyone who waits for a bus at a bus stop, in terms of greenery, canopy, trees, additional shade, moving forward in terms of perhaps the Measure W expenditures and just general green infrastructure. I know that we're wrapping up Temple, which is fantastic. We love it. It's safer. It looks great. But there's a bit of a missed opportunity because of lack of green infrastructure there. And seeing as, the heat island effect is something that really makes our streets and sidewalks boil, especially with these resources coming from Measure W. It's something that could be directly addressed with these new amenities, this green infrastructure. So how about the bus stops?
Yeah, go ahead.
So in the attachment to the report, there are, as previously stated, 2 tables. One is the base scope elements, which we're proposing, and the second is secondary scope elements. Secondary scope elements would come with identified funding specifically to add those elements to the base scope elements. But relocation of bus stops are a secondary element simply because we needed to decide or make a decision of where to control the budget. So that aside, each and every pre-design report will identify opportunities for secondary scope elements, and we will report back with budget and schedule to implement those secondary elements as well. provided they come with additional funding.
I think there's a real opportunity there. I mean, when you see people waiting for a bus and they're just trying to hide behind something to shield themselves from the searing sun, especially in the valley, a tree is like a godsend for people just waiting for something. So I'm really excited about the urban tree canopy possibilities. And then working with street services on some of their cool pavement and expanding that program exponentially. The benefits to the environment and the lowering of the temperature in double digits, it's very real. So if we, those two factors working in concert with one another, and you have a quality of life multiplier right there just for pedestrians and people who ride the bus. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, then I'd like to move that we approve the same recommendations with the additional instruction that recommendation 4 of the July 31st BOE report be held in committee into further instruction, and if we need to, bring it back to this committee in conjunction with my recommendations in item number 1. Okay? Are there any objections?
No.
Seeing none, so moved. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I believe that concludes all of our agenda items this afternoon.
Yes, it does.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr.
I'm
Gopore.
so sorry, but is staff still here on item number 6? I just had a couple of quick questions, but if they've left already.
Item numbers, who are you looking for? What department?
CAO and sanitation?
CAO sanitation for item
Looks like
number
they
6.
left.
Sharon's here.
It's all right. I can ask.
Are you sure?
I'll ask offline. It's fine. It's
Tracy's
fine.
here too. Do you want to ask her, Tracy?
On the sewer contract? Can you-
Root control. Pacific Sewer? No, maybe.
Okay, thank you. That's fine.
Are we good? All right, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you.